So a few important rules of thumb about cybersecurity. If you can think of it, not only will an attacker probably try it at some point, they in fact have probably already tried it. So if you can think of a potential way that somebody could gain access to your system, an attacker has already thought of that way as well. If an outside party is dedicated enough and if they're well resourced enough, they will gain entry to your system. Nobody's 100% safe. Because of that, the question for us becomes, what steps can you take to make your business a more difficult target than the next business? Going back to the camper and the bear analogy I mentioned earlier. And so kind of directly related to this also is cybersecurity is really, in many senses, a risk management exercise. You cannot eliminate 100% of your cyber risk. You can't eliminate 100% of any of your risks, whether that's your market risk or your macroeconomic risk. Nobody can eliminate 100% of risk in this world. So given that, what will you do to manage that risk? You can do things to avoid the risk. Maybe there's certain business activities that if you don't do them, and maybe they're not that critical for your business, if you don't do those activities, maybe it significantly reduces your risk of being a victim of a cyber attack. Risk reduction. This is a lot of the things that we'll be talking about today. What are some of the measures that you can take to, given the nature of your business, to reduce the risk of you becoming a victim of cyber attack? And then risk transference. This can take a few different flavors, but kind of one of the most common ones is insurance. Just like you can buy insurance for your home and your car and your inventory, you can buy cyber insurance. I think, Jeremy, you've got a little bit to say about that, and I think you've got some experience helping manage even some of those policies or access to those policies.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a number of different considerations, right? Certainly spend, your perceived risk. Again, if you're subject to some type of regulatory compliance, there's a litany of different policies for consideration out there. Most insurance carriers these days, large and small, recommend cyber insurance, right? In the event that there is an unfortunate breach within your organization or compromise, there's the average, I believe, in the most recent DBIR from Verizon was around $184 a record, right? So in terms of small business and total spend, that becomes a future-proofed investment for your organization and making sure that you have this type of policy as a fallback plan. If you were to leak 1,000 records or transactions and you were subject to that type of fine, you're looking at nearly $200,000 in penalties and fines. Most small businesses who have to pay up in terms of those types of fines with no backup or cyber insurance policy could find themselves in a pretty catastrophic situation. It just depends upon cash flow, all of those things. Either way, cyber insurance policy also link you in with other partners, value-added services that can often offer layered security controls or bolt-ons that come as part of the policy to set you off in the right direction regarding posture, maintenance, visibility, et cetera.
Yep. Thank you, Jeremy. So I think another important thing, and this goes back to one of my points on the previous slides, you should assume a breach mindset. That doesn't mean that you definitely have been breached. It's a state of mind that you can take to help some of these ideas permeate throughout your organization.
And so this is really more about like that true, when we're talking about that mindset, the question you should be asking yourself as an organization is, when we deal with breaches, we do this, right? Or if I have a breach, I do this. Anytime a breach happens, we should already have an understanding as we're building our business of how we're going to be impacted. How am I going to go about getting the information that is required or gathering the information that's required? And do you currently have that at your fingertips? Do you know where all of those crown jewels are, right? Do you have an understanding of the infrastructure and the assets? Who has access to it? Are you taking all of that data and are you putting it into a secure repository? Do you know where the data of a security nature, even the data that flows around your business, is stored? And can you access it quickly? What type of visibility do you have into that in the immediate, and is it in the cloud? Is it in a data center? Is it on-prem? Do we know what systems are impacted? And are we leveraging technology that provide at least that front-end visibility? When we start talking about growing a business, there's a modernization of that security landscape that needs to take place, right? When you're looking at proactive threat hunting, or at least just visibility, and that's the most vital component of all security. If I'm talking to a CISO at a global manufacturing company, my first question to that CISO is, what visibility do you have into the data and who has access to that data, right? How often are you surveilling that or looking at alerts from those environments? And all of this, when you compare it to the small business, even the home office, boils down to a tool on a single laptop that can provide you with detection to anomalous behavior. If there's a file that's opened on a local laptop, something that you're working with that you own, but it has access to critical information, do you have the tools in place that alert you to that immediately? And when we're talking about Mitre attack framework, this gets into a bigger organizational conversation, an understanding of the way attackers actually approach organizations. This goes back to what Brian was saying earlier about the ways compromise happen, right? Vulnerabilities, the way you're exposed. But the Mitre attack framework is some of the best data scientists on the planet collaborating over the course of the last decade to put together what we call a heat map for tracking the way that attackers vector into an organization, or the way that they will compromise systems and how they laterally move across those systems. Basically, there are only so many ways to attack infrastructure, computers, and information systems across the planet. There are not these magical movie-based ways to attack, right? Most of it, frankly, is very, very boring. And it is not, as much as Hollywood likes to glamorize it, it is not that way, right? It is someone sitting there on a green screen waiting for a computer to report whether or not they were successful. It is not glamorous. So, but this Mitre attack framework is the people with the white hats on tracking over the course of this last decade the way that attackers, malfeasance, criminals, cyber criminals will infiltrate a network. And all of that goes back to policy, right? There's a wealth of information out there on Mitre. Just reading the high-level information on Mitre will give you a very clear idea of how organizations like Cyderis and certainly other consultants that you could engage secure your networks.